Good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Thank you very much. My apologies. I'm running from one meeting to another. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking time to visit with me. We do have some other, I think, team members that are maybe going to be joining. They were also in another meeting and it went longer than anticipated. My name is Stephanie Elizalde, and I'm proud and humbled to serve as superintendent of Austin ISD. And I look forward to an opportunity where we will be able to begin to see each other in person and get to know each other a little better as I want to continue to work to serve. I wanted to take a few minutes to walk through some of the challenges that we've had as we started working on our staffing for the 21-22 school year. And then at that point, after I go through a couple of things that I hope will address some of the concerns and the email communications that we've received, that then we can open it up for some questions and answers, and our team can help in the areas that I may not have the information directly. So with that, I just want to kind of go back in time just a little bit. And as we've been building our budget, we have recognized that in some areas, both because of the loss of enrollment due to COVID this school year, along with uncertainties of what post-COVID will bring to us, we started our staffing guidelines utilizing the guidelines that were already here in place, and then made a couple of adjustments. With that, our intent and our goal was to ensure that we're following our mission, our vision, our values, and our priority focus areas, and ensuring that we're fulfilling the intent of that every student is receiving the resources that they need to be successful throughout our entire district. So in that process, we presented, I think it was in March, to our Board of Trustees where we were on staffing. And with that, we did discover that many of our PTAs, many of you all have been doing huge amount of work, both in the voluntary area of donating time to school, and then huge amounts of fundraising in order to support schools. Now, our goal first and foremost has always been to ensure that we stay in line with all of the goals and the missions of our school district, as well as those of both the national and the state PTA. And if there's a position that our district should be supporting, that's our core mission. We should not burden our PTAs in a way that isn't in alignment with both the state and national PTA guidelines. It is our responsibility. We should be providing the resources that our students need. So with that, we did, I guess, kind of discover along the way that we had some PTAs that have been financially supporting campuses and campus positions. So our team then met with each of the principals to look at the data so that we do have consistency in what data are being used to ensure that we're providing the resources necessary, regardless of where they are in our community. And so some of our review of data found that we absolutely needed to pick up some of the positions that our PTAs have been providing the financial support for, at least part of some of these positions. Within that review, it's also the concern that if we don't pick up those specific areas and if they aren't in alignment, we do have some challenges with being able to maintain the federal comparability. It's a formula that the federal government utilizes as we receive Title I dollars for certain schools. In order to keep that 25 to 26 million that we do get, you have to be able to demonstrate that campuses that are identified as receiving Title I dollars do in fact, prior to the Title I dollars, that they in fact spend more, that we spend more on students who are of abject poverty more than we do in schools that do not have the same percentage. If we do not meet that comparability report, we do risk losing $25 to $26 million. We have met the comparability report, but not all of the positions have actually been included in some of the reports. It's also a kind of randomized comparability study. So the feds pick a few campuses, and as long as those campuses are able to show the disparate resources, then we're good. They don't do every single school. So it's more like a randomized sampling that they do in our district. So with that, there were several positions that, as we identified, and some of our principals have done an excellent job of being able to help us with the dyslexia identification, which is one area that I saw many of our PTAs paying for. And so several of our principals have really just done an outstanding job of ensuring those students have been screened and identified. And that's going to allow us to actually pick up some of those positions that I think our principals were really relying in some instances on our PTA to do, and we really should not have been doing that. The district should have been providing that support. But every single campus has a slightly different set of data and have slightly different challenges. And so our goal here is to ensure that we're doing that from an individualized standpoint. But I want to be very, very clear that the district does not expect our PTAs to have to do the job that is actually our school district's responsibility. And then if there are some additional enrichment areas that campus PTAs may have the ability to raise additional dollars, then we would absolutely encourage the use of those dollars before or after school or in some other areas, so that we wouldn't be in a situation where we might risk some of our title money being utilized. And so I think in general, there were, as we added up all of the part-time positions and then the full-time positions, there were about 17.2 total full-time equivalents, but it was, I believe it was 29 individual people that were in those positions. And so we also want to ensure that any of those individuals, we have enough positions as the school year is winding down. We can work with those individuals to make sure that they have a position in our district. This absolutely, I agree with some of the emails I received with regard to what about these individuals. We don't want those individuals, they should not have a challenge because we're shifting or moving to ensure that the district is picking up some of these positions and that they are in fact being that we do have some consistency across the board in identifying them. So with that, I want to be able to open it up and respect your all's time and allow you all to ask me or our team some questions. And so we can do that either by just unmuting yourself, and we can just go one at a time. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk with you.
Thank you so much. This is Ashley Holmig from Cassis. I'm on the PTA. We really appreciate your time this morning. My question is less about the substantive issue, but more so about how and why the decision was made without consultation with those it impacted. So I'm looking at your mission of the district, which begins with in partnership with our families and our community. And to be really honest, there was no partnership here. This decision was made without any engagement whatsoever of those students who are receiving these services, of the teachers who were really negatively impacted, and the PTAs who raised a lot of money, and the donors who provided this sort of money. And again, I'm not talking about the substantive issue because I think we have a lot of work in this district to do on equality, but I am talking about how we do it as a community and as a partnership. And I cannot understand why we were not engaged, and also why emails were not responded to when we asked for a delay, and why the decision has to be made right now and not over a period of time when we can make it work for everybody.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think, quite frankly, I really really hadn't realized the call it a criticism, whichever way, hindsight's always 2020. If someone asked me if you could go back in time, would I do it differently? Of course. I mean, absolutely. But I think the biggest issue was that we did need to finalize our staffing guidelines, and we wanted to ensure that we have enough time to submit a budget. And so, the budget has to be, and our board was asking to ensure that they had more than just June. By law, we have to adopt a budget by June 30th. And our board, particularly because of COVID, I think very astutely wanted to make sure that there was budget conversations more than just June. And so we were presenting those in May. So there would be a runway time. And then in addition to that, none of this though we have a continuation of looking at data with each of our principals. So I know that our team was still looking at data, and that's why some of this has been a fluid type of situation. But honestly, just knowing that we really should have been providing all of our positions, from the beginning, it was more about evaluating the data to ensure that we had a consistent, equitable resource allocation. But do I wish that we had something in partnership? Absolutely. The intent was not to be exclusive. The intent was for us to have a system that was meeting the needs of how we were doing that across the board from school to school. And I apologize I apologize that it came across in a way that was that did not include conversations, and I'll certainly work to improve in that area. It was never the intent to do anything except pick up responsibility for what the district should have been doing with regard to position allocation.
Okay, thank you. Can you answer why it has to happen for the next school year and it could not have been phased in over time?
Because every year we run the risk on comparability, and it only takes one campus comparison not to meet that. And then
we've been running that risk for 20 years, at least our school.
Yeah, well, I'm not willing to be the one that I lose $25 or $26 million of federal funds. And I just, in all fairness, just did not see that this was something that could, with the number of positions that we were talking about, and we're talking about 17.2 full-time equivalents out of 5,000 positions. And so from the standpoint of percentage-wise, phasing it out, it's a small number of full-time equivalents, and in the best interest of the district, I made the decision to move in that direction.
Is that 25 million for 1 year, or is that over a number of years?
No, that's an annual title dollars.
Okay.
Hi, Dr. Elizalde. I'm Stephanie Carter, and I'm with the Davis Elementary. I mean, I think I just want to kind of echo on what Ashley said, which is just hearing you explain why right now is already like making me feel so much better about it. And so I would just really just in the future, would just really appreciate this kind of information before it goes public. And then my other concern is if it wasn't announced at that meeting where somebody asked the question, when was it going to be announced? Because I think that's what upsets me the most, is that these teachers at the end of the year, we're going to have to, we were all going to have to deal with the ramifications of this over the summer. And so that's just the first thing. And then the second thing, in terms of, the thing I care about most is the teachers and making sure the teachers have positions. So I know you said you would work with those individuals, but are they going to be able to be on the same campus? Are they going to be able to be in the same role? I think my biggest concern is the teachers.
So let me be completely frank. The position, I absolutely can make sure we have a position, but no one in our district can be guaranteed a particular school. That has to be based on need. And so I cannot absolutely guarantee that it would be at that campus. I need to manage expectations. I wish I could say yes to everything. I wish I could just say, you know, here's how I'm going to fix it, and I'm going to, but I definitely, if I make another misstep on top of the one I did by over-promising something, we all know that would be worse. Now, if there's a particular resignation from a particular school and that teacher, you know, was at that campus, then it's very likely, especially since they're elementary, that we would be able to slide those individuals then still on that campus. But I don't want to guarantee something that I would not be able to do. With regard to, you know, kind of the question that came up, you know, I think it was the Anderson feeder vertical team meeting, and we had just had a team meeting. And I mean, again, hindsight being 2020, I hope, you know, I hope we all recognize, I certainly do, you know, given at that particular moment, it's like we just talked about it, I just talked to a team. If I say something that's not honest, everyone on the team, who I'm also working, you know, to build a team around, would know that I wasn't completely honest about the decision, about the answer that we gave. That being said, we also could have managed that differently. So the plan was for us to come back that week and work with all of the schools, because we were still, as we are even at this moment, data are changing as students have been identified for dyslexia, particularly because many of those were in fact the area in which our campuses were needing additional support, were the number of students that have been identified as dyslexia. And so as those screenings and those identifications are increased, it could be that that position could remain on that campus. So the intent was to review the data the following week and put together a communication plan so that we could then talk with each of our campuses. And so instead, what we did at that moment was then the following week bring in all of our principals, because our goal was that our principals who have, you know, the best relationship with you all and work closely with you, that we would be able to communicate what I just did with you all, that would have been done through our principals. And so again, could I kick myself and say, could I have done it a different way? There's no hesitation on my part that I would have done it differently.
Hi, I have a
Hi,
question.
this is Jacqueline Fletcher with Highland Park Elementary. In reference to the AISD communications announcement that went out, referencing the idea of using equity as the foundation for the decision-making for which positions were supported. Can you speak to the fact that technology coordinators or coaches were approved for some campuses, and what the district is thinking moving forward for that position being at campuses district-wide?
I'm going to have to see if one of our team members can give me some of those specifics. I know that our chief technology officer was working with understanding that our campuses don't have access to regular technology support, and looking to create a design that would have this many campuses having someone that would be able to respond within, you know, for instance, during the day, if you were given so many campuses that are all geographically related. But I don't know where we are in that particular plan. I don't know if our human capital, and any questions that we're not able to get to, I'm going to make sure that we leave information so that we can get back, and we'll post that so that we can have all of those questions answered if there's something we don't have a response to. Let me see if Ms. Stevens might be able to address part. Did I hear your question before I move on though? Did I understand the question correctly about technology support?
I think so. I think I was surprised to see that as some of those positions as being one of the ones that was supported, especially given that our PTA is funding one of those positions at this time. And that the rationale was that we're trying to create equitable situation across campuses.
So some of it had to do with what programmatic, there was not just data on dyslexia, that was one area, but some of our principals have worked with you all in your communities for particular programs. So one of you has like a direct link to Project Lead the Way that has a vertical alignment to middle schools and to high schools. And so that's a programmatic, equitable need for a program. And so some of those, then we wanted to pick that particular position up because, again, there are data and reasons why that position existed. Some campuses had I want to say there was one that had a STEM focus. And so that was another area. Again, if it's programmatic, like we want to be flexible. I don't want us to be like everybody has to fit in this one box. So we're trying to create parameters rather than a formula, right? Because we're not all going to fit in a formula. We need to have local context for each of our campuses. So there has to be some commonalities, but there also has to be room for flexibility and creativity. And so where there is a program in place or one that's being put together underway, then we're going to support that because we do that throughout our entire district. We do that in some Title I schools, and we do that in some non-schools that don't receive Title I funds. So, and I may need to maybe just make sure that our team specifically gets back with you to make sure we're answering the question that you're asking.
Hello, can you hear me well?
Yes, sir.
Max Akesi here. I'm with the Brico Woods Elementary PTA. I'm presently the vice president and president-elect for the next year. To sum it up in one phrase, I'm confused. And the reason I'm confused is because everything I had heard until this meeting was like an equity-based decision. KXAN, Austin Statesman, AISD Communication, Zoom sessions I joined. It was all about equity and equity and equity. And all of a sudden, I hear this whole scenario of $25 million in funding that we could lose. So I'm confused about how come that wasn't communicated earlier, because, and my apologies, I believe I'm frozen. I'm not standing still there. But so I'm thinking, was that a miss on the communication that has been going on for the whole month of May? Because I was prepared to talk about how our PTA board is 100% aligned with the goal of all students in our district should get the same quality services. And if we collaborate together, we can come up with solutions. PTAs can actually help in achieving perspective. Am I not understanding something, or do you understand my point?
No, I think I understand your point, and I think we got better at the communication. And I absolutely think that again, there were some. I think the idea of educational equity as a broad stroke was certainly the message that I was utilizing without providing, I think, the specific examples that I just gave today. And I think, so when we started before PTA, like before I even knew anything, I did not know PTA were paying for positions. I've never been in a district, been in 4 districts. I've never been in a district for PTA funded positions. So it did catch me by surprise. Should it have, shouldn't it have, however I'll take all the criticism for that. But it was not my intent. And so when it was discovered, there certainly was part of me that was like, oh no, like we need to be doing that. And how is this affecting our comparability? And so, but before knowing that, our entire staffing model was centered around ensuring that we had equity, because it was discovered that we had some campuses that had way more staff than they needed, and other campuses that didn't have enough staff that they needed. And they were not patterns, by the way. As much as people might want to say, oh, so West Austin had a whole bunch of extra positions and East Austin did not. That was not the pattern. That was not the pattern at all. It was a very, it was much more organic. Like we had some campuses in East Austin that had more positions than than the guidelines provided for. And there were some in wet, so it was across the board. I did not see something that was like egregious or that someone was doing something harmful or bad. But the outcome was that we could not generate, like if someone asked me, how come this campus has this many positions compared to this campus? Like we didn't have the ability to be able to make a logical argument for that. So when we retooled that, I think my entire message there was we need to retool this from an equity-centered perspective. And I think not providing anything beyond that absolutely was, I think, seen as criticism and as if someone was trying to do something inequitable. And that was not at all, that just wasn't what I was trying to communicate, but I didn't do a good job. And we'll continue to work on, I think that's even why I wanted to like have some time. So, because I know PTA people are like the kindest people wanting to do everything they can for their school. So I just have never thought that we wouldn't be able to, whether we agreed or disagreed, that we would be able to understand where each of us was coming from. Not that we would see eye to eye on it, but again, if I could go back in time, you have no idea how much I would like to go back in time.
Dr. Elzadeh, you can go back in time. This is not a law or a policy. You have the ability to change your mind. And I would have to agree with Max. I'm confused about this reference to Title I. I haven't heard that until now. And I also, if this is truly about equity, then why are you shrinking the pie, taking away resources from people who use them and need them, instead of giving us the opportunity to work with you to grow them? I guarantee if you ask any of these PTA members, every single one of us, and I don't even know the men and women on the screen, but I bet every single one of us would say, yes, every dollar I give to my school, I am happy to find a way to give a dollar to another school. Why
Same here for us.
with us beforehand? Why didn't you want to have this conversation before you made this decision?
I would just ask you not to tell me what I wanted to do, with all due respect. You know, I understand that there are different perspectives, but the idea that we wouldn't be able to keep in mind that we do have to ensure that we don't have an inequitable distribution based on whether a particular group would be able to raise private dollars becomes a real concern when public schools have to be able to ensure that we are in fact providing all of our students, regardless of what part of our community they're in, with equitable resources. And so we have to use the same metric when we say we're going to provide intervention at campus A. We can't use a different standard for what that intervention is going to be at one school than we do at another. It has to be the same standard. And when we don't do that, then we're not providing an equitable opportunity for our students. And I would again say many of these positions, the district is actually going to pick them up, as we should. It should not have been a PTA responsibility. And whether I may or may not go back in time in certain areas, I'm not going to reverse the area of continuing to look at the data, and where we can find support for those positions, we're going to pick those positions up. It is our responsibility. And there are several of these that we are picking up because we should.
So hi, I'm Yamaris Masterton. I am the treasurer at Bernoff, and I have a question. So if I'm understanding what you have just said correctly, you're picking up some of these positions, but clearly not all of them. So how are we ensuring that the kids who need these services, perhaps in a place where you can't justify picking up that position, are getting the services that they need? If the PTA isn't allowed to, pay for someone to come and provide those services.
Well, I think each of those we have to look at for every single context, every single situation differently. But some of that still rests with my original statement that we can't have different metrics for what we're going to say students need assistance for. We have to have, that has to be consistent. We can't say at one particular campus, students that are whatever our metric is something different than it would be at a different campus. And I do know that they are, thank you for the question. I may not have seen all of them, but I do know our team is putting together the specific lists of which campuses, which positions we are going to pick up. And so I think each of our principals will have that list along with our Chief of Human Capital, Ms. Stevens. And we should be able to absolutely post, here was the position at the schools, and here are the ones that we're going to take that responsibility that we should have from the beginning.
Hi, this is Katie Stewart from Highland Park Elementary. I'm just wondering, what's your response to the Texas Senate saying that they're going to push something through, that they're going to allow PTAs to fund positions?
Well, we're going to abide by the law, by every definition.
How would that affect the federal funding if it's a state thing?
Yeah, I'll have to look at how our campus staffing allocations are so that I can ensure that if a PTA is requiring us to pay for said position, that we recognize that we may have to make adjustments in some other areas to make sure that we don't end up in not meeting a comparability study.
Can you elaborate on that further, what that would mean? I just don't fully understand all the nuance.
We have to make sure that we don't have an equitable distribution of resources, regardless of where the source is coming from.
Can you do a real life example of the PTA funded a position and you felt like you had to make a change elsewhere? Would you take away a grade level teacher? I mean, I just don't, how would that impact us?
I don't want to speculate because every single campus has a different number of students to teacher ratio based on economies of scale and based on what the student needs are. And so we'll absolutely have to take that one by one, and we just need to ensure that we aren't in a situation where we're not meeting the disparate expenditures from one campus to another. And it's very difficult to make that speculation because we have to know what we're spending at all of the campuses, not just at the ones that PTA may be requiring us to support. So it'll just have to be a case by case basis.
So one of our messages when we fundraise is we make it obvious, like Texas spends $4,000 less per pupil spending than the national average. And so the real power structure that we should be challenging right now is the state of Texas. I mean, I think about this all the time, the second largest GDP in the nation. There's no reason why every single student shouldn't have every single one of these resources. And so I think moving forward, I would just want to be more of a partner with the school district in that. And I think we are like a really valuable resource to utilize in terms of like organizing, grassroots organizing. So, I know there's like a lot of bad feelings, but I mean, I would really like to like have a larger discussion about, how can the PTAs help their schools right now? Because, the legislature is not going to meet for another 2 years. So like, how can we address these issues right now? Because parents are always going to want to make their individual school better and give their individual students what they need. But, long term, like I agree, like this is something that we need to work on with the state. And we should be partners in that.
Thank you for recognizing that, Ms. Carter. And I absolutely, again, reach out in sincere apology for missing an opportunity to do this in a different way. And I thank you for stating that you would be willing to work with us so that we can continue to move forward and find out how can we do this together. And I absolutely we'll set that up and we'll start to move forward. We are either 47th, 48th, or 49th every time you look at educational spending, no matter which year I think we look at in terms of as a state, and on top of that, the amount of local dollars that our tax dollars are actually paying under the name of schools, and the percentage that do not go to schools anywhere. The dollars of recapture that we pay that do not go actually into school districts that are struggling financially because they may be in rural areas. The idea that every child in Texas should be worth the same amount of money regardless of where they live in our state. And the percentage of dollars that all of us are paying, again, in the name of these are school taxes, and what that does not go into schools at all, I think is also worthy of continued conversation, and we certainly could use help with that.
This is Doug Finley with Highland Park Elementary. Just along those lines, I'm curious to know what your approach and your tactic to address the recapture system is. You've been very swift and expeditious with this measure. Can we expect a similar attack on what clearly is a flawed formula to address, if we're talking about inequities and resources that are misappropriated? To me, the root cause is a formula that perhaps was intended to function correctly, but is not. And so I think you're in a key position to shine a spotlight on that.
Yes, sir. As a matter of fact, my dissertation is on recapture, and the fact that the way it was designed with the intent of being, redistributed, of course, had they never intended it to actually be taking dollars away from school districts that have significant percentage of economically disadvantaged children within their district. So like in Austin ISD, although there's a large number of dollars being generated, we have 50 to 52% of our children that are economically disadvantaged, right? And so I think the original flaw is the fact that when recapture was originally thought of, it was affecting a handful of extremely property wealthy districts that had very few economically disadvantaged students. And when you look at it now, that number is now almost 443, I think, at last count, out of 1,000 school districts. So that has to tell us that there's something wrong in the design. And so, yes, sir, I'll be following up and seeing how we can work collectively to get our voice across about the flaw in the design, even though on face value, right, it makes sense the way people first explain it, but when you actually look at where the dollars are actually going and how they're not actually even going to support schools, I think is something we haven't explored that we really do need to get messaging across.
So my board asked me to bring up this suggestion mainly because we've gone through a very tough year, right? A lot of us is like in PTSD mode, teachers and students. So timing of this just was like, didn't work out for a lot of us. And the proposal that was brought up from our perspective was we're 100% aligned with what the goals are. Is there a possibility of an exemption for a year? The policy has been passed. You set the policy, no PTA funding for staff, but is there a possibility of an exemption of a year where we can all collaboratively work together and chip in, like time-wise, financially, and come up with something, right? The PTAs are here to help from what I've heard from a lot of other people, but is this actually even possible, or is that federal funding that you talked about, if anything is even exempt, it's a problem? And I'd like to end, before I ask you a question, with a thank you to the district for taking on the half salary cost of the assistant principal. We had been paying for years, and that was a substantial amount that we had to raise. And the fact that we were told this year that we would be helped with that from the district, thank you. That was awesome collaboration there.
So I think the challenge is that, I don't have an exemption from the federal government on comparability. But I also want us to recognize that this is it is fluid. If we find, as you're going to hear within the next couple of days, I know our principals will have the specific information. I know that at each of our campuses, there are positions that we're going to pick up. So before we think of it as it went from that it was extreme, there are several of these positions that the district is going to pick up. Not all, I agree. I'm not saying we're picking them all up, and we need to be able to communicate with you specifically what the positions are. But I want us to also recognize that it is fluid, and I want to continue to always not have this is the way it is, there's nothing in between. I want to look at our data. I want our principals to be involved with our chief schools officer, with our human capital department, so that we can find the way in which we can best serve our students. We may differ in lots of areas. I think there's one common, very strong commonality is every single one of you on this screen, whether you're a parent, a PTA member, or one of our team members, every single one wants what is absolutely best for every single student. I think that there's no doubt about what the intent and the goodness of everyone on this screen is. And we certainly have opportunities. I certainly have opportunities to improve, and we'll continue to see how we can do better with that. But I honestly don't have a year of an exemption from the federal government. And yes, we've made those comparabilities in the past. And I just want to be reminded, if you could, I'm working to put myself in your shoes as much as possible. And I ask you to do the same if I could, by recognizing I would not want to be the first superintendent who didn't meet the comparability report, and that we would be risking $25 or $26 million. Whether it's a slim chance, a medium chance, it's all about what campuses are selected. And yet at the same time, I don't think it means we have to take every position that PTA was paying for. I think you gave just an excellent example. Mr. Kessie, I don't know if I'm saying your name correctly.
Yes.
I'll work on it. But this wasn't all or none, right? We did pick up 0.5 of those assistant principals. We added full-time TAs in our pre-K4 classrooms across the district, not just at Title I schools, across the district, because we had some parents that are picking up a pre-K4-year-old and then have to come back 45 minutes later to pick up a second grader, right? And our principals told us that's crazy. Like some of our parents can't do those things. They can't always come more than one time to pick up children at a school. So I would ask you to also just kind of weigh all of this as a greater whole, rather than just to focus on an area that I certainly had a big misstep, and I take responsibility for that.
Thank you.
I have another question. Do we jeopardize comparability if one PTA helps another school, a Title I school? Is there a way we can brainstorm on that?
And actually, my chief of human capital, Leslie Stevens, that was one of her thoughts of getting with you all to see if we had sister schools, if there was a way we might be able to look at if we do this here and if we do that here. And the way I would be able to do that is I have to identify those schools that have the largest percentages of economically disadvantaged, because you don't have to do it everywhere. We just have to make sure that the extremes have equity, right? So that if that school happens to be the pair that they compare, if we're good there, then I'm not worried, right? Like we've got schools that are 40, 50% economically disadvantaged. It's the schools that are 80, 90% economically disadvantaged. And then if they pull a campus that is 5 or 10% economically disadvantaged, and we don't have that disparate expenditure, that's where we risk those dollars, right? And so I love that idea, and I'm writing that one down, as I know Leslie is as well. And we'd love to follow up if we could do some type of a sister school there. And then I did pull up, there are several school districts, not in Texas, but throughout, I want to say, and I'm going to be wrong, of course, it's either Portland or Seattle. They did something like what you're describing, Miss, I'm going to say your name incorrectly too.
Holmig. Don't worry, Holmig.
Holmig, okay. So I think you're right on target. If you'll allow me to say that, then I think there are multiple creative ways that we can still be able to do some of that balancing.
I would personally love to help if you need any parent involvement.
That would be great. And we can start working on that now, so that we would be able to possibly mitigate some of the concerns of some of the losses maybe that you all are most concerned with at your schools.
Thank you.
Welcome. So we do have another graduation in a little bit that I need to get ready for. I really appreciate if you had a question and just didn't hear it asked or come up with one as you've processed our conversation here today. If you would please send that to, who are we sending those to? I'm sorry. Send them to my chief of staff at Tony Cordova, TonyCordova at austinisd.org. Or of course, please send them to your principals. Your principal can get them to us as well, whatever you're more comfortable with, so that we can also have our responses to the questions we received today, as well as any more that we receive. And then please know, we will reach out so that we can start brainstorming how can we turn this into a win-win situation for all of our children. And I think you all have already posed some very tangible ways in which we could do so. And I appreciate the opportunity to hit reset. And thank you for making time for us today. Hope you have a wonderful afternoon. We've got Austin High and then McCallum this afternoon, and we had Ann Richards earlier today. Thank you all for everything you do for our schools. You all do amazing work, and I sincerely thank you for everything you do for each and every one of our kids. Have a great day.
Thank you.